Should the Dallas Cowboys reconsider giving Trevon Diggs a massive contract extension? All that more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your
Locked
daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on
Cowboys.
Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. We're getting to your Twitter questions today. This first one is from Jack. He wants to know, should the Dallas Cowboys maybe reconsider the idea of giving Trevon Diggs a massive contract extension this offseason?
I don't think so. I mean, look, I think this idea that you can, find guys like that on a heap pile, or that it's bad to pay corners, or I'm not even sure what the concept is behind not paying.
Well, okay, so let's break down the concerns, right? Some people think that the 2021 season, he had a lot of turnovers, but he gave up a lot of big plays, right? Last year, he only had 3 interceptions, was more consistent game to game, didn't give up as many big plays, but I think people are just worried that, hey, if he's not getting interceptions, how valuable of a cornerback is he?
He's pretty valuable, because if he's not getting interceptions, it's because people aren't throwing the ball his way. I think that's the thing about Trevon Diggs, is that he's dangerous. It's a different type of corner. It's not the kind of shutdown, sort of corner that doesn't even exist anymore, honestly. But I think it's still kind of in people's heads as that's the type of corner that you pay. I think that having someone like that on the field is valuable for the overall health of your secondary, because it makes your quarterback think twice about throwing the football on that side. And again, I think that there are aspects to the fear that Trevon kind of strikes in offense coordinators and quarterbacks' hearts, and how that affects their play that may not, manifest itself in interceptions. It manifests itself in more sacks. It may manifest itself in other ways, in running, in taking off and running instead of trying to throw the ball. So, I think people are trying to get clever because it's the offseason and they're running out of topics, I think. But to me, I feel like Trevon Diggs does something that is important on a defense, and that is make the offense, afraid to take risks on his side. And look, he give up some big plays? Absolutely. But would you say that he had a bad year in 2021?
No,
absolutely not.
No, absolutely. Well, I think he was one of the most valuable defenders in the NFL in 2021, despite giving up a lot of big plays.
Exactly.
You get 11 turnovers. Those are game-changing plays. Who cares if you give up 600, 700, 800 yards?
Yeah, and he didn't get less interceptions last year because he dropped more or something like that.
No.
It's because people stopped throwing his way, because he had 11 interceptions the previous years, guys. Let's come on, let's have a little bit more logic. Let's dig a little deeper into some of these things and find the context. Yes. Because the idea is that this is a guy who, when you throw the football, he has as high a chance as any quarterback in recent memory that I can think of intercepting the ball. And that's, if you're looking for a superpower from Trevon Diggs, is there a better corner in the league that's my ball? I mean, when was the last time you saw a corner that was as good as Trevon Diggs, as my balling balls that were in the air? I think he may be the best in a decade or so. Yeah. I mean, so no, I'm re-signing Trevon Diggs if possible.
Yeah, and I think there's this fear, hey, if you give him a big contract, maybe he'll regress a little bit, but that's just the nature of the cornerback position. If you want to sign a cornerback to a contract extension and just get rock solid play every single year, all pro production, those guys aren't out there. Even somebody like Jalen Ramsey, who is this, highly thought of corner, can have really bad games and even have down seasons, right? It's just, I think if you're against paying Trevon Diggs, to me that means you're more against paying big money to the top cornerbacks because you recognize that there's going to be a lot of variance from year to year.
Well, there's just a class of fans that just refuses to pay anybody, or as soon as someone gets paid, that player becomes the villain, right? Or
Sure.
he's stealing money from the team or whatever. Like, guys, you have to pay talent in this league, and
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't think that Trevon Diggs is talented, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe like he's done things that other corners haven't done, and he's done it while being extremely inexperienced and still learning the position. So
Well, and
I'll
remember
invest
one
in
of
Trevon Diggs.
the reason why the Cowboys didn't pay Byron Jones, who was coming off what in 2000, I don't remember. 2018 was a Pro Bowl season. 2019, a little bit below that, but still played well, is because he didn't get turnovers, right? So you
Yeah.
finally get the cornerback that gets turnovers, and now you're thinking about getting rid of him because, oh, well, he's maybe not quite as consistent. Like, you've got to pick one way or the other. There's no such thing as a perfect cornerback. If you're searching for that guy that gets you 6 interceptions every year and only gives up 100 yards, they just don't exist.
Yeah, and guess what, guys? Like I said, eventually you have to pay these guys. Like, that's just the way it is. So Trayvon Diggs is not someone that I considered. Maybe we shouldn't pay. Like, he's playing at a high level. He's a superstar in this league. Teams don't like throwing at him for very good reason. And I think that will continue to be that way, for years to come. And it's not, again, he didn't have a down year last year. He had a better year than the previous season. So I don't really understand this argument.
I mean, and the last thing I'll say about Diggs is I kind of want guys that are really good against my division opponents. Go
There
look
he
to
is.
see how well Diggs has played against Washington, New York, and Philadelphia. He's been unbelievable in those games. So keep the guys that help you stay really competitive against your division opponents.
Yep, absolutely. And Diggs is one of those guys. I understand that he's going to be a little bit more difficult, and I understand that there's a little bit more variance to his game than some of the other people that we're considering to
Absolutely.
pay. But that's just the position. That's not. I mean, that's not even necessarily just him. Like, it's incredibly difficult, nay, impossible, to be consistently great at the cornerback position year in and year out. The rules just don't allow for it anymore.
Well, and actually, I mean, I think there could be some variance in how many interceptions he gets from year to year, but I don't think the ball skills are going to be declining.
No.
Like, he still
Yeah.
has really good hands and really good instincts. It's just how many opportunities do opposing quarterbacks give him? Last year we saw fewer. We saw them attacking, Anthony Brown more, the slot cornerback more. That's valuable in itself.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, just like it is, we talked about it yesterday. It's a weak link position, so it's important that you have a minimum at all the positions. And sometimes that can be tough when you pay one guy a lot of money. Having said that, though, if you can reach that minimum, you still make one side of the field incredibly dangerous to throw to. And
Yes,
on a very real game day level, like, that's a very difficult thing to work around,
absolutely.
and a big advantage for the Cowboys defense.
All right, Landon, let's talk about a player who's maybe getting a little bit too much hype right now going into training camp. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 that you can spend betting on everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run of a game, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. What's better than that? There is no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 back in bonus bets. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are answering your Twitter questions, and this next one comes from @CowboysApologist. He wants to know, what player are we expecting too much of this year? Someone who's got a lot of hype, but their play and growth on the field might not reflect that.
Well, I don't know that we're expecting too much from him, though. Maybe we are. I am nervous that if Sam Williams doesn't quite have the jump that we think that he will, that it's going to be a lot of disappointment for a guy that, is still kind of learning how to play the sport. I do think that he showed us a lot last year and got us really excited. And I think it's easy to take that hype like we have and really roll with it and think that, oh, he'll definitely take another step forward. And I still do. I still think that he will take that step forward. And I believe that he is going to be a guy that breaks out a bit this year. But I also found myself having to kind of temper my expectations because he's still a young player. He's still figuring it out. He's still pretty raw. It seems like he has the kind of attitude and kind of work habits to get better. It sounds like he's worked really hard this offseason to try to improve, and he's approached a bunch of different folks and kind of hone his techniques some more. But I do think that we can get the train a going sometimes, and it really starts rolling, the hype train, and it's easy to kind of over project what we think these young players are going to develop into. Now, the good thing here, I will say before you chime in, is that they do have solutions behind him if he doesn't quite, take the leap. They have Fowler, they've got other pass rushers, Armstrong, obviously. So there is, a contingency plan if he doesn't quite break out the way that we all expect. But I do think that there is a lot of hype around him right now. And I'm just a tad bit nervous that we get to training camp and maybe he hasn't quite taken that leap yet.
I love Sam Williams, but this is the same exact player that I thought of when I read the question, because I think everybody right now is kind of like penciling him for 8 to 10 sacks.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get 8 to 10 sacks, as a second-year player, even though we liked what we saw from him as a rookie. You mentioned all the other guys. We know Micah Parsons is going to play a lot. We know DeMarcus Lawrence is still a really good player. Dallas clearly loves Dorrance Armstrong. They love what he can do on first and second down. And then they brought back Dante Fowler, who was a favorite of Dan Quinn. They're going to rotate these guys in a lot. So I won't be surprised if Sam Williams is significantly better this season, but only has 5.5 sacks.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing to mention here is that these expectations of 8 to 10 sacks, that's also coming on, whatever snaps he's limited to, because he's not the starter as it stands right now. So
he's fighting to be the third guy, right?
Yeah. And so I think that's, we have to understand what the opportunity is for him as well. Like, he may not get the chance to produce 8 to 10 sacks. I mean, look, what we saw last year was a guy who on limited opportunities was able to produce at a very high rate. If he doesn't produce at that high rate and he's still getting similar amount of snaps, it may not look like it did. Again, it's all about perspective and what your expectations are, right? Like last year, we didn't expect anything from Sam Williams. So for him to come in and give us what he did on limited snaps was incredible. It was amazing to see. But now that the expectations are, up here, and you're expecting him to produce at that level with, on 25, 20 snaps a game, that's a high expectation if he's not able to keep up that extremely high level of play, which again is a difficult thing for a veteran to do, I think. It will be disappointing to a lot of folks who are expecting him to come out and be some Pro Bowl defensive end. I still think he can be that, but like the expectation that he will be that's a high floor to set for a second-year player.
Yeah, we saw some really good flashes from him last year, but what I really want to see is the consistency. Like, we saw him last year a couple of times get in on a run play and make a tackle for a loss, and then there would be 17 or so snaps where you would notice him. I just want to see the down to down consistency, be a more reliable player, because if he can do that, that's how he's going to get on the field more and get the opportunities to get the 8 to 10 sacks. Because if he's just kind of a flash player, I could see the Cowboys keeping his role fairly small.
Well, the good news for him is that, and for the Cowboys, obviously, is that he's a good run player, like a good run player.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're having to be judicious about when you're deploying him on the field. Like, you can simply rotate him in for DeMarcus Lawrence whenever Lawrence needs a breather. It's not like you have to, plan for a third and long or a pass rush only situation. He is a versatile two-way player. We just need to see the consistency come up. So, listen, I'm all in on the hype train, and I've been part of the person who's been overhyping him, I'm sure. But I in the interest of what's best for the player and for all of our sanity, I think it is safe to understand that what we see makes us think that he's going to be up here. But there is also the history of sometimes players take step back. Sometimes players' progression is not linear. So it's something to keep in mind.
The only other player that I would mention is Jake Ferguson, just because
that was another one I was going to think of. Yeah.
Well, he had 175 yards as a rookie, and that was like 4 plays that made up like 75% of his production. And there was a really nice play he made against the Giants where he kind of leapt over a defender. There was another play that he made after the catch that was really nice. And that was basically it, right? And I think everybody's projecting, oh, he's just going to walk in and maybe not replace Dalton Schultz, but be a 500, yard receiver with 6 touchdowns. It might just not happen, right? The Cowboys might just use a heavy rotation of tight ends. They might not use as many tight ends as they used last year. I expect him to be better, but I don't know if he's going to be 600 yards better than what he was last year.
Well, yeah. The other thing is he may not be capable of doing what we would of all that. I've been cautioning since Dalton Schultz left. I understand that a lot of folks didn't love Schultz or they weren't upset to see him go necessarily. But I again bring up the fact that as much as we like that tight end room, 80% of the production of the tight end room walked out of the door with Dalton Schultz. As the flashes we saw with the 3 other tight ends, and then obviously we added one in the draft. That's all well and good, but as far as production on the field, like there isn't much. Like Ferguson is the most experienced guy, and he played a small percentage of the snaps.
The Cowboys saw Jake Ferguson and still felt like, hey, we have to use a 2nd-round pick on a tight end, right? So, I mean, that doesn't tell the whole story, but at least it tells you some. Like they're not completely banking on Ferguson to be Dalton Schultz's one-for-one replacement,
and they shouldn't. I mean, no. That's even if Ferguson has the leap that we all hope that he will, I still think that that's an overestimation that he could just step in and suddenly produce at the level that Dalton Schultz was. Now, part of that is like what you said. I think that, we'll have conversations about how this offense looks, how it's being deployed, where the targets are going in this offense versus last year. Maybe that is something that will change a little bit. But I think the bottom line is that hype is one thing, but it's like the expectation in general, like it
just feels too high. And it's not Ferguson, right?
That's what it is. It's just they're hand waving it away that, oh, Ferguson will just produce what Schultz did. That's not something that you can just like say and think that that's necessarily going to happen. And if that's overhyping or just overestimating or underestimating what Schultz was doing for this team, I don't know. But I do think that there is this idea that, oh, Schultz is gone, it's fine. Ferguson will take what Schultz left off, and then Schoonamaker will add in there. I think that this is something the Cowboys really need to work out, because it's not a guarantee that they're going to be able to get that same kind of production for the tight end position.
And just to be clear, we really like Jake Ferguson, and we think he's going to be much better in year 2. But to be that tight end 1 and to be the guy that replaces Dalton Schultz, who was in year 5 last year and who was coming off a Pro Bowl year, it's going to be really difficult. So I don't think anybody should be expecting that. But you're on Twitter all the time. That feels like that's what the expectation is for Cowboys fans.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll see how it plays out.
We'll see. All right, Landon, we've got one more question, including which player did you absolutely love that the Cowboys signed or drafted late? Just never worked out. We will get to that next. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. We're going to be off on Friday, but Landon, you and I are jumping back on Monday's show to do some more fun Cowboys debates. So make sure you tune in for that. Our last question here from Quarterkin11 wants to know, who is the one player that you really had hoped would work out for the Cowboys, whether it's a low-end free agent or an undrafted free agent or a signing that just never happened?
I'm going to mention a name here. It's going to make us all very sad here. And it's not Matt Johnson, because he wasn't an undrafted free agent.
He also never practiced. So
yes, well, allegedly he did, but I've never seen any video confirmation of that. This is a guy who actually practiced quite a bit and played quite a bit, and I was endlessly excited for right up until the last game of the preseason when he jumped up, got hit, fell down on that ankle, and was not able to really ever come back after that. And that was a young man by the name of Raymond Rattaway, who was a wide receiver from, I think it was 2014. It might have been 10 years now, right?
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, probably. I think it was 2012, 2013, maybe.
He tore up that whole preseason. The training camp was incredible. Look, there have been lots of these guys, including, Cole Beasley and a number of other guys that have been undrafted free agent receivers that have made a splash in practices. But I don't know that anyone else did it the way that Raymond Rattaway did. I mean, he looked legitimately like he was not only going to make the team, but also get some potential, serious looks. And I think, looking back at that whole situation, if the Cowboys, had a chance to do that over again, they wouldn't have even let him play in that fourth preseason game because they knew that he was already on the team and that they probably had a role for him to get some snaps during the game. So the fact that they put him out there was more a necessity because they just had to roster a certain amount of players. And, obviously undrafted free agent receivers end up usually playing in the fourth preseason game. But it was a very unfortunate situation for him to get injured in that game and then just never kind of came back all the way from it, lost an opportunity. I think about that a lot and how tough this league is for individuals. And I think about how someone like Raymond Rattaway did every single thing possibly right and still kind of got a bad break. And that's the rough part of this game, I think. And so that's the name that came to mind for sure.
I've got two. I've got an undrafted free agent, and then I've got somebody who was a high pedigree guy that the Cowboys signed. And we'll start with that one. I was really excited when the Cowboys signed Ryan Williams, the running back from Virginia Tech. I think this was
wow, God, yeah.
Well, this was either as the DeMarco Murray era was kind of wrapping up or right in the middle of it. I don't remember.
I think it was near the end that they started signing. We started to get excited because we wanted to see like a pairing of Williams and Murray.
And I remember Williams in training camp and even the preseason looking pretty good, but he was just one of those guys that could never stay on the field. He had a pretty major injury, I believe, early in his career in Arizona, and
I think it was his rookie year.
I think it was
never came back from it.
But that was somebody, that I thought could have potentially been a first-round pick. Cowboys signed him cheap. Just is never able to get back that explosiveness. That one always bummed me out. And then I'll go back to receiver since you brought up Radway. I was always a big fan of Jamaica Rector. Do you remember Jamaica Rector?
Sure.
Number 85. He kind of, listen, had a little bit of a CeeDee Lamb wiry body, could move a little bit. Actually stuck around the NFL for a while. Was with the Cardinals for a bit. Never really developed into anything more than a down roster receiver, but that was somebody that I really enjoyed watching in training camp. And I believe one year he led all receivers in the preseason in yards.
Yep.
But this just happens. It shows you the talent around the league that you could have somebody look that awesome in camp and preseason, but never really do anything in the regular season.
Yeah, and there's so many of these names that are rattling around in our heads. That,
there's a million of them. We talk about these guys all the time.
Another name that I was for just throwing random names out. Another name that I thought about was Ken Bishop. Remember the defensive tackle?
Oh gosh, yeah.
I thought for sure Ken Bishop was gonna, he made the team if I remember correctly. I thought that he would develop into a player that would be better and better every year. He kind of tailed off. So
do you remember how bad a shape the Cowboys defensive tackle room was in when we were excited about, hey, maybe Ken Bishop and Davon Coleman can be a really good defensive tackle pairing for the Cowboys.
Can David Irving play defensive tackle? Apparently he could, but he could not also stay on the field.
I got one more before we go.
Yeah.
I think people forget that Jamil Showers was ahead of Dak Prescott on the depth chart because he was better in practice than Prescott. Prescott had the draft capital, but Showers looked really good as a quarterback whenever he got an opportunity to play. Now, he wasn't as developed as a passer, but he made plays. The Cowboys eventually had to just move him positions because they just didn't have the room at quarterback. But I think in an alternate world, if some stuff doesn't happen to the quarterbacks, I just wonder if he hangs around as this utility QB3 guy.
Honestly, if Jamil Showers came out this year, I wonder if he doesn't make it better as a quarterback.
Oh, I bet he does. 100%.
I thought that I was convinced that he was at times the second and or third best quarterback on this team. For multiple points. And he never got any opportunity. One thing I never understood about the way the team handled him was he kept showing us stuff.
Yep.
He kept showing us stuff at quarterback, and they refused to play him there because they were insistent that he was going to be this catch-all, down roster, practice squad guy who they could have do a whole bunch of different stuff. And I understand that because those guys are useful and that's a good plan for someone to stick in the NFL. I just really felt like Jamil Showers had a future at quarterback.
Well, I think
And
he
they
was a
didn't
better
really give him a
quarterback
chance.
than like Taysom Hill, right?
Yeah.
And if I wondered, like, if Taysom Hill happens, if Taysom Hill happens like 3 years before Showers, if teams don't look at Showers and be like, hey, he can do a lot of that same Taysom Hill stuff. Why not keep him at quarterback? Let him do the quarterback sneaks, have him do some stuff as a running back or a wide receiver. I just think he kind of got a raw deal.
I agree. I think the Cowboys pigeonholed him into this situation where, hey, this guy can be a flexible practice squad, do everything for us on practice day type player. And they missed an opportunity to develop a guy that, listen, I'm not in those rooms. Quarterback's a very cerebral position. Maybe there's some stuff that we don't know, but all I know is what I saw on the field in Oxnard and on the field in those preseason games. And there were definitely times when Jamil Showers looked more like a professional quarterback than Dak Prescott, than Kellen Moore, than
Absolutely. Definitely more than Kellen
all the
Moore,
options
right?
that they had at the time. Yeah. So I felt like it was an unfortunate situation that he didn't at least get an opportunity.
I always love doing some member berries here on the podcast. It's always fun to bring up
Yeah.
some of these old, previous pet cat loves. We want to hear your favorites, so make sure that you
Yeah.
send them to us at Locked On Cowboys. Send them to Landon at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier. The podcast is free and available on all platforms. Go check us out on YouTube. Have a fantastic weekend. We'll see you guys right back here on Monday.